Thank you to everyone who's joining us on Facebook and YouTube for the live stream of tonight's At the Virtual Table event. We'll be getting started in about 30 seconds. Thank you again to everyone who is joining us live on Facebook and YouTube for tonight's At the Virtual Table with Laura Washington and Lynn Sweet. Here is Laura Washington.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome everyone to our final 2021 edition of At the Virtual Table. It's been quite a year in politics and government, and we're going to talk about a lot of that year tonight. First, though, I want to talk about the Sun-Times. As you know, we have so many great digital offerings that you can get the Sun-Times wherever you are. And that's why we want you to know, as always, that you can subscribe to the Sun-Times and get the new Sun-Times e-paper, which is a daily digital replica of the print product. Lynn loves to talk about this. It's right there, at your fingertips, and it lives all the time at paper.suntimes.com. You can get that with our special digital offer that gives you unlimited access to both the e-paper and every story on suntimes.com for only $2.49 a month. Cannot be beat. You can learn more and subscribe now at suntimes.com/subscribe. Maybe some holiday gifts are in store for you there too. suntimes.com/subscribe. And now we're going to get down some business. I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Sweet, my co-host and Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. Lynn.
Thank you, Laura. Joining us tonight is Congressman Rodney Davis, who will be speaking to us from the front porch of his home in Taylorville, Illinois. He's in his fifth term in Congress, and he's the ranking member on the House Administration Committee. He's a ranking subcommittee member on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and on the House Ag Committee. He's no stranger to the Capitol. He worked there for 16 years as a top staffer for now retired Representative John Shimkus. And we're talking to Congressman Davis just a short time after he decided to seek another term in the House to run for re-election and not consider other statewide options. Thank you for joining us, Congressman Davis. Welcome to At the Table.
Well, thanks for having me, Lynn and Laura. Appreciate you putting me on.
So I want to just kind of jump in some of the politics of what is going on now. I reported in my column today on how Congressman Mary Miller might end up having to run against you. Let me set this up for our listeners. In the Democratic drawn remap, basically 3 Republicans were put into two Republican districts. So Congressman Mike Bost has declared for one, Rodney Davis the other. And one other thing to know, before I ask my big question, there are 5 members in the Illinois delegation who are Republicans. Adam Kinzinger's not running again. The 4 other incumbents are have all supported Donald Trump. And I want to just mention this as I'm asking the question, because in a run against Mary Miller, who is allied with some of the most strongest pro-Trump wing of the party, including Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Congressman, what difference would it make if Trump gets involved in your primary?
Well, first of all, Lynn, I'm pretty happy to be drawn into the new 15th district. I traveled to multiple counties that are new to me just today and had great meetings with local officials and just residents and hopeful constituents to be. I don't really worry about what anyone else is going to do. You've known me now for 9 years, Lynn, and I've had primaries and I've had almost probably upwards of $100 million spent for and against me in the 13th district in the last 5 races I've run. So we're going to just continue to do what we do, talk about our great constituent service operation, talk about how we've been able to make sure that we work with the Trump administration and President Trump to issue in the tax cuts of 2017 and 2018, and also talk about what we will do to fight back against the Biden administration's failure to address inflation, failure to address our border issues, and frankly, failure to address the crime problem that's devastating our communities and our cities like Chicago.
So before we get to some of those specifics, I want to just clarify, because CNN had a report that Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to get Trump to make an endorsement in your race. So if he got involved, could you address if it would make a difference?
Well, anytime President Trump gets involved in a race, it amplifies a race. I certainly, as President Trump's co-chair of his campaign during the last race, somebody who campaigned with the entire Trump team during the Iowa caucuses, where I got to go to my old grade school in Des Moines, Iowa, and caucus at multiple precincts on behalf of the president. I would welcome his support. These are the issues that anybody has to face when you're looking at redistricting years. But as of now, I'm the only announced candidate in the 15th district, and frankly, the only incumbent who lives in the 15th district. In a lot of areas I now have in this new district are areas that I traveled in my previous job on a regular basis. And we've been able to have overwhelming support from Republican officials and officials that are not even affiliated with the party. And I'm looking forward to representing them in the next 2 years.
I just want to note for our listeners, if you live in Illinois, you can run in any district. It sounds kind of weird. I don't know why we have that rule, but that's what it is. So here is something that happened.
One thing, Lynn, just so your listeners know, I'm not running against Sean Cass and Marie Newman. Even though I can, I'm not going to do that. And
I won't come back to Illinois and pick a place to run. So we've done this. We got some business done. But today's news, a group of Trump allies from conservative organizations have renewed their call to kick Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney out of the Republican conference, which is what you call your huddle when you get together and pick your leaders and work on your issues. Yes, they're on the January 6th committee. Yes, they voted to impeach Trump. Yes, they're two Republicans who have carved out a distinct path for themselves. I think I've talked to you about this before, and you said you wanted them to stay in the conference, but now that these renewed cries have come out and the January 6th committee is issuing more subpoenas, I want to revisit this with you. Should Kinzinger and Cheney stay in the Republican caucus?
Well, first off, let me make sure that your viewers know that I was actually an original Republican appointee to the January 6th Select Committee. And keep in mind, this Select Committee is exactly what Speaker Pelosi wanted to happen. She did not want a true bipartisan commission that didn't have current members of Congress on it. She didn't want equal subpoena power. She wanted this partisan circus. I disagree with my colleagues Liz and Adam in accepting those appointments from Speaker Pelosi, and they know that. As a matter of fact, I spoke on the floor yesterday, or 2 nights ago now, in regards to the contempt resolution against Mark Meadows. We still don't have answers as to what is the speaker's role and what was the speaker's role in getting the National Guard to the Capitol on January 6th.
All fair enough. But let me just have a little, let's keep to my narrower question. Where we're parked at now, should Kinzinger and Cheney stay in the Republican caucus? What's your thinking on that?
And I'll answer that, but I appreciate you interrupted me a little bit. I do want to finish this thought though, Lynn. Speaker Pelosi has stopped the Sergeant at Arms, her political appointee, from abiding by a preservation order for communications leading up to January 6th. That office, the Sergeant at Arms, is directly under the oversight of my House Administration Committee. What is she hiding? Those are the questions that we're not seeing asked by anyone on that Select Committee. And that's my message to your viewers. We need to find out where the communications are. We can hear all about text from the White House, but we need to understand what was actually being discussed in the Capitol leading up to January 6th. Now, to answer your question, though, Lynn, I think.
But Congressman, before you move, so how would you propose to get at those answers? If not through this committee, through the work of the committee, how will we get the answers and get to really to the bottom of what happened on January 6th?
Well, the same way that the Senate investigated January 6th, they used the committees of jurisdiction to actually talk to those officials who were directly responsible, and they exercised their oversight responsibility. We're not doing that on the House side. The House Sergeant at Arms is the only House officer that's failing to comply with our preservation request. And we have no access to their texts. We have no access to their communication. And the only person holding that back is the Speaker's own appointee, her own legal counsel. Those things need to come out. And this 1-6 select committee is not asking these questions. And it's very frustrating to me because it's a direct offense to the brave men and women in the Capitol Police, where I can tell you the Speaker just today just said that she feels the Capitol is safer than it was on January 5th. I don't agree with her. I don't think there's been proper attention to what went wrong prior to January 6th. And this select committee is more worried about attacking President Trump and attacking former government officials than they are about getting the answers as to what happened on the complex and how the security failures were so miserable. But you want me to answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, please.
All right, I'll answer your question. Look, I think it's a slippery slope. No, if 2 Republican members are kicked out of the Republican conference, it actually gives Nancy Pelosi more of a vote margin in the House. It allows Nancy Pelosi to appoint 2 more Democrats to the Energy and Commerce Committee. It adds to the Democratic majority. We can have our differences, and frankly, there's so many people with different constituencies that are in our conference, and the Democrats have the same issue. We've got to learn to be a Big Tent. I'm not happy that we had 2 Republicans take an offer from Speaker Pelosi to be on the select committee, and the select committee still is not asking the questions about security failures around the Capitol. But in the end, I don't want this slippery slope to then be used later to say, are we going to kick members of the Republican conference out who voted with the squad to defund our military a few weeks ago? I mean, these are the questions that get asked when that slippery slope begins.
Okay, so you're okay with their staying in the conference. And I know the reference you just made because one of the Republicans who voted against the defense bill is none other than Mary Miller. So the extremes on both sides didn't like a bill that most every other member of Congress approved of. And that shows a strange kind of unity in their dislike of the measure, though, for very different reasons. Also want to point out before we move on that the 2 members that Pelosi rejected for the Republican picks, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, they voted against certifying the Biden election. And now it turns out that Jordan is a figure in the investigation. Okay.
Well, hold on. Jamie Raskin, who's on the committee, got up to object to President Trump's certification in January 2017. You had other members of this select committee that voted against certifying George W. Bush's victory in 2000.
The only thing is, and I know we're going down a slippery slope. Now we're talking about, though, in the context of an attack on the Capitol, not just objecting to stuff. So let me maybe just ask one related question about this, and then we could bounce to some local political stuff in Illinois, which we're all hungry to get to at. So I understand what you're saying. We have to figure out how to make the Capitol safe, and we have to figure out how it was vulnerable and how to prevent an attack. But why can't we also figure out what happened? What's wrong with subpoenaing Mark Meadows, who already gave thousands of texts to the committee to just ask him questions? You were part of the group that voted against holding him in criminal contempt. What's wrong with just getting him there to ask him questions about what he knows?
The same Mark Meadows provided thousands of texts, thousands of emails, thousands of communications, thousands more than what Speaker Pelosi will even provide to the Oversight Committee about conversations that her political appointee, the Sergeant at Arms, had leading up to January 6th. This is a political sideshow circus. The Select Committee is not serious. They only want to get the headlines to go after President Trump and his former employees, in this case, Mark Meadows. Look, I will tell you, as we look at this one instance, what does this say for future administrations when the chief of staff is going to have communications with the president, with people in the executive branch? And is this going to be a crisis, a constitutional crisis, whenever we have a change in the White House and versus who's in charge in Congress.
A worthy question, but let me jump because I know we only have you a few
Well,
extra.
one thing real quick, Lynn, is, and I think those texts that Mark Meadows sent and they gave to the select committee clearly shows, I don't see where there was an organized effort that was coming out of the White House. That clearly is shown in the text, the thousands of texts, and many have been released publicly. And keep in mind, those that were released were very selective. So if that's all they have to prove an organized effort, I think it's again more of a partisanship issue than it is actually getting to the root cause of why the Capitol was so vulnerable that day.
Release might have been selected, but when they write what will be the history, we might presumably we'll see the whole thing. We're shifting gears quickly. Illinois politics right now, it seems. Do you think we still have to find some more candidates in the Republican side to run for governor? We have 4 people in. Today's news is that the mayor of Aurora, maybe somebody billionaire Ken Griffin is interested in. What do you think of the field so far? And you decided not to run for governor. What should we be looking for?
Well, first off, I was open and honest with everyone who asked. My first preference was to run for re-election, but my political battlefield was going to be set by Democrats in Springfield. And now I'm running for re-election. I don't think it's my duty as a Republican in the congressional delegation, as a Republican in Illinois, to say whether or not we've got great candidates now or if anybody else should come in. That's going to be up to them. And one thing I will tell you is that I'll make a decision on who to support when the field is finalized and when petitions are filed. But at the same time, I think anybody in this field right now can beat J.B. Pritzker in a head-to-head matchup.
And why do you say that? Because several of the candidates are not exactly household names, and J.B. Pritzker has hundreds of millions of dollars at his disposal. So how are they, especially those who are not as well known, are going to overcome that kind of a hurdle?
Well, I think the final Republican nominee for governor and Republican nominees across the state are going to have the financial resources to compete. This is going to be a disastrous year for Democrats, and J.B. Pritzker has been a disaster as governor. This is a governor who has continued to just issue executive order after executive order. There are many issues that have gotten a lot of gubernatorial candidates traction because of J.B. Pritzker's ineptness. And I will tell you just personally, Governor Pritzker failed miserably during the pandemic when it comes to unemployment ID fraud. I was a victim of ID theft because somebody filed for an unemployment claim under my name. And instead of actually working with us, the governor decided to get butthurt and call me, say I was sniping at it when that was clearly not the case. I wanted to work in conjunction with the governor.
What happened, Congressman, in terms of you being a victim? What happened?
I got a letter in the mail from the Department of Employment Security stating that somebody had applied for unemployment benefits under my name. I then got a card in the mail that was a debit card that would have been used for those benefits. I didn't get assistance for months on end from the Department of Employment Security. And even then I got one phone call that I asked if they could call me back. And I never got a call back because I was on the runway in Chicago getting ready to take off to go to DC and I couldn't talk. But I had to go to the Federal Trade Commission's website. I had to go register as somebody who's a victim of ID theft. I had to put all my information in to put a freeze on my credit report. And can you imagine being a senior citizen having to go through these things where you can't get anybody on the phone because no one was there in the office, and they're trying to go online?
No, I agree that how the COVID benefits were administered and there was chaos on the unemployment benefits last year. But as we close out, if we talk about a Republican field in 2022, you don't even have a Republican out there running for senator. And Tammy Duckworth is up for another term. What's going to happen on that one?
Well, I think we'll have Republican candidates up and down the ticket. Actually, I don't think. I know we will.
Name some names? There's no blue chip name I've heard to run for the Senate on the Republican side. When will this person make themselves known?
Well, I serve with a lot of people in Congress who didn't start as blue chip names, myself included. These are races that will be determined in the next few weeks. Keep in mind, it was the Democrats that decided to push the primary back to June because they didn't complete their job with their supermajority to draw legislative maps.
But however we got there, we are here for a June primary. And I think given all the interest in running against Governor Pritzker, where you have 4, possibly 5 candidates, maybe more, don't you find it interesting that no one is talking about running against Senator Duckworth?
No, I don't find it interesting. I think the delay with the holidays now being happening, I think it just automatically puts family issues for people above politics. And frankly, most Illinoisans and most Americans for that matter, they don't live and breathe the politics and a red team and a blue team. They're just going on with their lives. And frankly, I think they'll care about the Senate election when the primary comes. And I really think they'll care about the Senate election and the entire election process in November of 2022.
And speaking of teams, as we close out our time with Congressman Rodney Davis, he is a baseball player on the House Republican team. Can you remind me, what position do you play?
I'm one of the younger guys, so they make me catch.
Well, things to know about Congressman Rodney Davis, who joined us tonight from Taylorville, Illinois, from the front porch. Congressman, thanks very much. The best to you in the new year.
Thank you both. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you. The same to you. So that was interesting. Covered a lot of ground there, Lynn.
Yeah.
And now we're going to shift right into our next guest. We've got a lot to talk about and a lot to cover. And with us, we have 2 tremendous pros in politics and government. One is a former longtime reporter who's now on the advocacy side, but she's still working very hard in the whole political realm. And the other is a colleague of ours who, Rachel Hinton, we're going to be saying goodbye to you soon. And for those in our audience who may not know, Rachel is abandoning us. The Chicago Sun-Times political reporter is going away to the competition. Rachel, I'll let you share a little bit more about that, but we're going to miss you very much, particularly because you've been doing such a great job for us, not only in the paper, but on this show as a longtime regular guest of this show. Rachel, and where are you going?
Going to the Better Government Association in the new year. So I'll miss you all. I mean, I hope that we'll be able to collaborate. I hope to come back on the show if that's something that's allowed. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're not going to let you get away that easily. And what are you going to be doing at the BGA?
Enterprise. I'll be their first enterprise reporter. I'll be covering state politics, which is what I covered here, as well as a few other things, I believe, as well. So some city stuff, maybe some county stuff. It's still really to be determined, to be honest with you. So I think mostly state things.
Well, we'll be watching you, and we'll definitely be having you back. And now I'd like to introduce an old friend and old friend of both of us, Lynn and mine, and that's Madeline Dubeck. Everybody knows Madeline's name because she's been in politics and government in Illinois for decades. She's a deeply experienced political reporter and editor. She currently is executive director of Change Illinois, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit that champions ethics and efficiency in government and elections in Illinois. She was also once at the BGA, where she was vice president of policy. And before that, she spent many years in journalism covering local and state government and politics. She served as publisher of Reboot Illinois. And before that, she was assistant vice president and executive editor of the Daily Herald. She also served at the Daily Herald as the paper's political writer, columnist, and editor. Welcome, Madeline.
Good to be with you both. And congratulations on the new job, Rachel.
Thanks.
So, Madeline, one of the reason we invited you, there's a lot of things to talk about, and we'll get to them. But the reason we invited you on the show is to sort of talk about the ward remap, particularly the Chicago City Council ward remap, which is in flux and has been in the news a lot lately. And you've been deeply involved in pushing for more public participation and engagement and access around the remap process. Could you just tell us, our audience, a little bit more about what you've been doing through Change Illinois and what the current status of the remap is?
Sure. So Change Illinois and lots of community partners in the city of Chicago, like Common Cause Illinois, League of Women Voters, IVI, IPO, many others, got together more than a year ago and worked on supporting the creation of a resident advisory redistricting commission. So we went ahead and created the Chicago Advisory Redistricting Commission. We got some recommendations from community groups to create an independent selection committee, and that independent committee interviewed more than 430 applicants to serve on this commission. They chose 13 commissioners and alternates. Those people went through some pretty intensive training, thanks to Mayor Brown's law firm, and had some demographer expertise from Joey Chen of the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And over the course of June, July, August, and September, they went out into various neighborhoods in the city and held virtual hearings and gathered public input and drew a new ward map for the city of Chicago that we're calling the People's Map. And where it stands right now is that for the first time in 30 years, the city council was not able to come up with 41 votes, which would have blocked a referendum and the people getting a chance to vote on a new map. There is a split at the moment between members of the Black Caucus and members of the Latino Caucus. The Latino Caucus has their own map. They're calling a coalition map. They've introduced it to the city clerk to get it to a referendum and make sure theirs would be the first on the ballot. Meanwhile, the commissioners on this commission that we supported are talking to members of the council, including members of the Black Caucus, members of the Progressive Caucus, members of the Latino Caucus, and trying to find some form of compromise so that we can get all or as much of the People's Map in front of the people as possible.
Can I do some of the word math so people know what we're talking about? Because what everybody who's listening, this is really just coming down to a tug of war over how many Latino wards there will be and how many Black wards there will be. Madeline may disagree with me, but hold your thought for a minute. And so in your map, how many Black and Latino wards are there?
There are 15 Black wards, 14 Latino wards, 2 Latino influence wards, and a total of 37 majority minority wards.
Okay, so and on the other maps, because we still could avoid all we need to do to avoid a referendum is come to 41. And I
don't know why a referendum is such a terrible thing, though, Lynn.
Well, that was my question, Madeline. Is that your end goal? Is to have a referendum? Would you rather have it go to a vote, or?
Absolutely.
And why
Absolutely.
is that?
And so, I mean, the goal of the commission and the groups that are supporting this effort to truly center this around residents and not political incumbents is to try to get a vote to the people so they can choose the map that best serves them rather than the map that best serves people's political interests in the city council.
So I'm not arguing the point of whose map is better. I'm just trying to inject what I see are the reality politics in this, which is the math. Okay, because the people with the power right now to make the deal are the people who might be in the majority white wards. All they have to do is make a deal with either, so you have 18 Black wards and the most or minus 14. So if the math is there, that seemingly,
and yet they didn't get to 41 by December 1st.
They haven't. They still have time to avoid the referendum, and the power has shifted. This is the point I want to make. Before they missed that deadline to not need 41 votes or a supermajority, they couldn't come to an agreement. Now with this referendum, they lose all control and all power. It's an all or nothing. There's every political incentive to make a deal. And the people with the leverage are the people who probably, if there's a block of white aldermen, They're easy, perhaps, to bring into a deal. You adjust a few blocks here, there, tweak this, tweak that. You don't need to make wholesale changes. So, Madeline, how do you not see that there is the makings of a deal already in motion, and to avoid a costly referendum and a time-consuming referendum, and God bless you, a massive education program. See, if most people who, I would like to first challenge a lot of people to name your alderman, state rep, state senator, and member of Congress. So to focus on this will take a mighty bit of work. But in the real world, how do you not see that there's a deal that's going to be made that will sidestep your referendum?
There very well could be a deal that's made that will sidestep the referendum. And if that happens, that will be a loss for the people of the city of Chicago, in my view. But in the meantime, we still will have won, because we have shown the world that there is a different way to do this, a way that truly centers people in neighborhoods. This commission that we created was as diverse as the city of Chicago, which is much more complex than black versus brown. It's too simplistic to just turn it into that sort of fight and leave the narrative there. We had 41 hearings over the summer, all at night and on weekends, attended by lots of people who know their alderman's name or their alderwoman's name, and who wanted to give input into how they want to see their community shaped. They don't want to have lobster wards anymore. They don't want to have spaghetti shaped wards anymore. Right. They want to have wards that reflect the community they feel in around them. And so we showed a different way to do things.
And that is a huge point on the state legislative and the congressional maps. Especially you look at the congressional map, communities that have strong bonded interests, Beverly, Mount Greenwood, for example, wanted to stay together. It's a Herculean task to try to try and do that.
Let's step back a minute, though, Madeline. I want to hear a little bit more about the referendum. Lynn says it could be costly. What are the nuts and bolts around? How would a referendum happen, and what would actually happen, and when would it happen?
So it would, if there is a referendum, it would be during the primary, which will be at the end of June, which is the next election. And so we're going to have an election anyway, so it's not going to cost taxpayers anything. There would be an election no matter what. It is certainly costly to educate the public about ward maps. That's true, and that would fall upon the people who are pushing the various maps. But it would not cost taxpayers anything. So it would be a question on the ballot in June, as it was 30 years ago in 1991.
And the question would be something like what?
I guess, was when the election was.
What would voters be asked to vote on, and then what would be would it be binding, and what would happen after that?
Well, at the moment, there would only be a question about the Latino coalition map, because that's the only one that's been submitted to the clerk to be put forth for a vote. And so at some point, I assume there will be a vote on the other map that the Rules Committee has been showing and shared for the first time on December 1st after.
And shame on them. Shame on them for that.
And let me point out, it was a piece of paper that was not in any way dynamic or interactive.
More shame on them for not putting it out. That was terrible.
So, and they came out after that quick meeting on December 1st and said, we need to get more people involved and have more hearings and have more transparency, which is what this Chicago Advisory Redistricting Commission has been doing for many months now.
And then if the referendum passed, which that
map would be the ward map for the next 10 years, right. Barring lawsuits, of course.
Right, but to get your map on the referendum, it would take what?
It would take the support of 10 members of the city council who have not signed on to and supported any other map.
And what's your whip count?
My whip count is 0. No one wants to come out publicly for this just yet. There's a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes, however. And, we've been approached by blocks of people who understand that we really involved people in this process and engaged them and have a lot of support and credibility from having gone through that process in a completely open and transparent way.
Let's bring Rachel into this conversation, because Rachel, you've been covering this story from your perch. Any thoughts about the politics behind this and where you think this is headed?
I don't know that I would say that it's headed toward a referendum. I believe that aldermen understand that would be bad for them to allow voters to really weigh in on this, that they would cede a lot of control and a lot of say so in terms of what the wards would look like. And I think that people in both caucuses, both the Black and Latino caucus, I believe will come to some sort of agreement, especially before, I believe the golden date is May 19th is when they have to decide on this before the referendum really, kicks into effect. I believe we'll see something before that date because I think that they understand that the stakes are very, very high for them.
Who has the leverage right now? I mean, we have the Black Latino caucuses, but we also have another group of aldermen who have a vote. There are so many factions in the city council. Who you think has the upper hand or more leverage right now than anyone else?
I think that's a difficult thing to kind of surmise. I would say that the Black caucus has slightly more leverage because there are already wards in place, a number of Black wards, Black majority wards. So to say, okay, we're going to reduce that number, I think that, there are arguments about, this is diluting Black power. This is, diluting the Black voice or the Black vote. I believe that gives them slightly more credibility to that argument. But I don't think that anyone really has like the true upper hand here. I believe that the Latino caucus also has an upper hand that they can play. The census numbers are undeniable. The population in the city, in the state, in the county has really grown over the past 10 years. So why wouldn't they get another seat or another couple of wards in the city council? Why wouldn't they get another seat in the General Assembly and Congress? So I think right now what we're going to see is kind of a negotiation process. And probably it won't play out in public, but I think that those two sides are really going to have to come to some sort of agreement because they both are making good points or valid points. I do think that the Black caucus here might see, their number of wards reduced because the population figures really aren't in their favor. But, I've been wrong before. Let's see how this goes. I mean, who knows who's on their team? Who knows who's really doing that negotiating behind the scenes? Maybe they have some smooth talker who can say, no, we need to keep this number of Black wards because X, Y, or Z. And maybe, they give up a little bit of power somewhere else, or they sweeten the deal for Gil Villegas and say, we'll support you in your congressional run. It's all politics. At the end of the day, it's all politicking. And somebody's going to have to come up with a good deal to make sure that, they win.
And just remind us, that's an interesting point you bring up about Gil Villegas. Remind our audience, who is he and why is he important?
He's an alderman. He's the head of the Latino caucus in the city council, and he's running for Congress in the newly created, I believe it's a Latino majority ward, not ward, district in Congress. Oh, Lynn's shaking her head. Lynn, what is it?
It's Hispanic influence. It's not a majority, which means if multiple candidates with sharing the same base, in this case, if they're all Hispanic, then a non-Hispanic person could win because you only need a plurality to get the nomination. I want to make another quick observation about why it's tough. The numbers are the numbers, and here's the point. It's still based on the numbers. I keep saying this because even if Madeline hated the way the wards looked, spaghettis or whatever Rorschach test shape we have, the undeniable truth is you go to this race and ethnic politics, the city has lost thousands of Black residents. And that means you probably have a really weak argument to argue if you're talking about even equity under a Civil Rights Act or whatever. You just have a losing argument.
But Lynn, deals can be cut, and the numbers can say one thing, and the deals can say something else. So
deals are going to be made here.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily depend on numbers. It depends on who comes up with the best deal.
I'm trying to combine Madeline's good government interests, my view that, which agrees with you, it's going to be a deal. I am saying it is harder here because with a loss of population, you can't pretend it didn't happen.
Sure.
Whether or not you want to have Madeline's map and a referendum or not, that's just kind of the starting point. But let me, if we could put the map aside, we could always come back to it. Since Rachel is on screen right now, you had a story today fascinating about the state of play on the Republican side of the governor's race, where everyone is waiting to see who wins the Ken Griffin primary. Billionaire Griffin with his tens of millions that he promises to use to try to defeat J.B. Pritzker. So you wrote today in Aurora Mirror, make it in, maybe Griffin's guy. So what's the state of play right now?
We're still waiting to see. I've heard a number of different things. I've heard that Ken Griffin is supporting a slate, and perhaps the Aurora Mayor, Richard Irvin, would be at the top of that slate. Mostly what I'm hearing right now is Irvin, what I can super confirm is Irvin is really considering a run for governor.
Mayor of Aurora.
Mayor of Aurora. He's in his second term in that office. It's not entirely clear what a backing from Ken Griffin would look like, but my sources tell me that he would have the backing of Ken Griffin, which would come with millions of dollars for ad buys, for campaigns, for people to go around and knock doors and basically share this guy's campaign platform.
If he just writes a check and bankrolls the guy, that's not good for him politically either. What was the reaction of the four other candidates already in the race?
The two who spoke to me, one says, I welcome anybody who is trying to defeat J.B. Pritzker. That's Paul Schimpf of Waterloo, a former state senator. And then State Senator Darren Bailey of Xenia was not as open or welcoming to Richard Irvin. He said, let's look at this guy's voting record. Let's look at the, politics or the policies that he pushes. He should be running in the Democratic primary. He shouldn't be a Republican primary candidate.
And why is he saying that, Rachel? There's some
voting record that I pulled from 2014 to present shows Irvin only pulled one Republican ballot in 2018, which is when Governor Bruce Rauner was facing a challenge from Gene Ives.
Problem, especially since you mentioned Darren Bailey. He is the Trumpiest Trumper of these four who are running, and he picks a talk show host to be his running mate. What's with that?
I think in some ways this is him trying to position himself as the alternative to Pritzker, or not even alternative, but the Trump ticket Pritzker, if you would. Obviously Governor Pritzker has Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. Maybe he's trying to go for the same kind of Black voter base who's slightly more conservative, who's tired of seeing crime. I can't mute myself. Who's tired of seeing crime in the city, who's tired of seeing, problems and people leaving the city. And I think he's really trying to go towards that base and trying to recruit as many people or appeal to as many people as possible. Whether or not this woman is going to do that, obviously remains to be seen. She has tweeted some things. Obviously, she's not a fan of President Donald Trump. She was a never Trumper, used that hashtag many a time in a tweet in 2016. But I mean, whether or not she can overcome that and convince people that, yeah, I may have been a never Trumper, but I'm still a conservative. I still believe in conservative values. It's very early. We're 7 months away from this primary.
It is very early. I think it's really interesting, Rachel, that there are so many African Americans. Well, at least two among the folks we've just been talking about, the woman you just mentioned, and then of course Richard Irvin, are both African American and prominent people, but not people you would normally expect to see being recruited actively and urgently recruited by at high levels in Republican races. What's your thought on that?
I think that Republicans are tired of losing, and I think that they're willing to try something a little bit different, and they're trying to reach different bases of people and trying to fold more people into their base of voters. And so I think that this is an effort to really try to reach out and to try to show like, hey, we're not the Republican Party of the past, or we're not just a Trump party. We're not just, a Reagan party or Jim Edgar, former Illinois governor. We're trying to incorporate as many different people. We can cover a broad base. We're very diverse. Whether or not voters believe in that, whether or not they turn out and support that message, obviously remains to be seen. But I think that that's some of why we're seeing such a broad base or a broad coalition, broad spectrum of people on the Republican ticket so far.
So here's something I think we're going to see from the local, state, and federal races. Rodney Davis touched on it. You just used the word crime. Republicans are going to make crime, particularly in Chicago. They're going to run against Kim Foxx. They're going to run against
Lori Lightfoot.
Yes. And Madeline, what do you think of my analysis here that, we talk about sometimes about nationalizing a race. I think in the state of Illinois, we're going to stateify the race. Rodney Davis wants to talk about crime in cities. I know he did it in the context of his district, but, and I see what other candidates are talking about already. Is this going to be the unifying theme for?
Absolutely. I mean, it's clear to me they've done some polling and they have their pulse on the people, and this is what people are talking about and worried about and really, concerned about. And so, absolutely, they're smart to take advantage of that and try to focus on it and make as much of it as they can. And I think it's a fair vulnerability on the part of many incumbents right now when we have record-breaking numbers of murders in the city of Chicago.
And I think we saw that under Trump as well, with Kenosha. He really seemed to try to tie crime with, these liberal Democratic mayors, governors, whatever else. I think specifically mayors, as like, this is the reason why we're seeing all this looting and all this crime. We can't trust Democrats to run cities. And so I think that maybe we began to see that under him and during that time, and also all the looting and civil unrest that we saw last summer. And I think that we're probably just going to continue to see that stretch out, especially because the numbers are kind of backing up that argument.
Before I know there's some other topics, Lynn, you want to get to, but before we leave the whole remap issue, Madeline, I wanted to come back to you because we always solicit questions from the audience, and Rosamond Little or Lytle asked, and this sort of dovetails with how you described earlier this year. There was a big outpouring of voter interest, and you solicited a lot of opinions, and she wants to know, what should citizens do to ensure that we get a fair map in the future? Going forward now, as we wait to see how things roll out, what can voters do right now and in the future to make sure that there's a fair map?
Start spreading the word to their family, friends, and neighbors, and get everyone who you can reach to start contacting their member of city council and ask them to support getting as many maps in front of voters as possible for next June. Listening to Rachel talk and describe the dynamics within the city council just underscores for me that what we're seeing, if we see a deal get done, is members of the city council picking their voters, ensuring their best chance at re-election, and completely disrespecting and ignoring the people. And so the people have to literally rise up and demand something different and keep the pressure on these members of city council to do things differently, which I would add was also something that Mayor Lori Lightfoot ran on and has backed away from a bit.
Just so I want to be, I think I have maybe a way of now totally understanding a bit why the aldermen, in the interest of their self-preservation, where that is the priority, how can I get a ward that I can win in? And that's what they start when they use the computer model. Well, this precinct is good, this precinct is bad. I want to get rid of, the east side of Halsted Street because they never.
I want to keep the person who was filing to run against me last time out of my ward.
Yeah, I get. So when your demographers worked on your map, was your prime directive to keep communities together then? Like, we're not going to split Albany Park. We're going to keep Peterson Park, my beloved North Park, Peterson Park. We don't want to split them. And that's when you either went north to south or however you started doing it. We're saying, Englewood should not be in 2 wards. We got to look. That's
more than that. It's like 6 or 7 wards?
Yeah.
6,
Englewood?
at least 6, yes.
Mhm.
So exactly, Lynn. Here's the thing. There was not a demographer drawing this map. These were literally residents of the city of Chicago who had been trained and were being advised by a demographer. The people on this commission drew this map, and they didn't, they listened to the people. They went out in the communities. Englewood is a prime example. The other neighborhood you mentioned, Austin, Logan Square is another one that is carved up into 5 or 6 different wards. And that makes it impossible for people to know who their alder person is
with you.
and how to get resources and help. And so, yes, this commission decided that keeping communities whole was something they wanted to prioritize and make a goal as much as humanly possible.
So when your citizen map makers did their maps, did they agree on what it meant to keep communities whole?
They did, yeah, for the most part. There was one difficult moment, and that came over whether or not to include part of McKinley Park in order to create an Asian majority ward. And this commission, in the end, voted to, it was the first to draw an Asian majority ward.
Because that was a community of interest, because the neighborhood and the ethnic group were the same.
And the people in those communities came out and gave lots of testimony and feedback to this.
Technically, it's not an Asian American map. It's a map that kept the community of Chinatown together.
Chinatown and beyond, yes.
Yes, to see.
Yes, because the Chinese population is spread beyond Chinatown.
Exactly.
Right, but that's the concept. Okay, Laura, you had a question.
No, I did. I just wanted to, maybe we have time. We're running out of time, but we have our time for our little round robin. As I pointed out at the beginning of the show, this is our last show for 2021. And so we thought it might be a good time to sort of review the year and to talk about, and we're going to each share what our story of the year is in politics and government. And I guess I'll start by just talking about what we were just talking about a minute ago, crime, which sounds like it's going to be, crime and violence sounds like it's going to be a major campaign issue next year. And it certainly it's become an issue this year in Chicago and beyond. And it permeates and connects to practically every high level elected official is going to have to answer on that, from Lori Lightfoot to Kim Foxx to Tony Preckwinkle to Tim Evans, who heads up the court system. And these folks are going to have to answer to constituents and beyond that for crime. And it's going to be a real wedge issue. And the real reason I think it's such an important story is because no one seems to have any answers. It seems like our elected officials and policymakers are not working together. They're on the defensive, and there's a real uproar, I think, coming out of not only the communities where the crime has been prevalent for way too long, the south and west sides of Chicago, but now it's reached out to throughout the city, and that makes it a really big story. Madeline, what's your big story of the year?
So I'm going to take an obvious one, and it's ward redistricting, but let me make this point. What you just said, Laura, the foundation for that is the wards and the ward remap. And Englewood is one of those communities that suffers from a lot of violence. It's carved up 6 or 7 different ways. And so it's hard for the people who care about Englewood and who live in Englewood to get any help and response from government. And so, whatever topic you pick as the big story of the year, it all starts with that foundation of government, which is the districts. And so when these districts are drawn behind closed doors in deals and are brokered out of the sight of the public, it's a disservice to all of us, and it trickles down and creates bad policies and bad policy decisions later.
Absolutely, well put. Rachel, what's your story of the year?
I'd say the fall of former Speaker Mike Madigan. I feel like I covered it, and it was crazy to watch. It was crazy to watch or to hear about, oh, he doesn't have the votes, all these different voting processes to figure out who's going to be the next speaker. Okay, he doesn't have the votes. Who's going to be the speaker? These late night meetings that are going on, the session, it ends a little bit early so that Democrats can go behind some closed door in a basement of the Bank of Springfield Center, I think, and try to figure out who's going to be the next leader. And then, covering, Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch, but also just generally the kind of power vacuum that opened up. Okay, Madigan doesn't have the votes. Who can get the votes? And okay, what does that mean for the party? Where are we going to go? What's the direction of our party? And so not just, the end of the Mike Madigan era in the, Illinois legislature, but also, the end of his time as leader of the Democratic Party of Illinois. So that now means, okay, there's going to be a slightly different structure in terms of how we fundraise, not only because Representative Robin Kelly can't raise, state dollars, but because he's not the head of the party anymore. So it's not just going to be a focus on, making sure that the Democrats in the House retain their seats. It's now trying to make sure that everybody can retain their seats. Not everybody, but obviously Democrats. So I think that was great to watch from a political reporter perspective. It was kind of crabs in a barrel sometimes, watching people, who you think are maybe allied together, put out statements or snarky little things about someone else who's running for an office or someone who, whatever, just watching the infighting, watching people try to come together behind whoever is, the leader. So Speaker Welch, Representative Kelly, it was dramatic. It was fun. And for me, it was interesting. And I think it's going to have a very big ripple effect in Illinois politics going forward.
Do you think it's changed the state or just state government in any fundamental ways, or is it too early to tell?
I think in some ways it has. I think both Welch and Representative Kelly have both decided to try to branch out the power instead of keeping it all under one person and under that one person's designated person. We see, a leadership team under both of them who seem to be willing to share the power, to ask for insight, to negotiate. Obviously, the speaker, both the heads of those things make the final decisions, but it seems like more people are involved and maybe more voices are heard and like their insights are genuinely heard or genuinely folded into whatever plans are put forth. Obviously, Republicans are still kept out of that, but for Democrats, I think that it's been better for them.
Lynn, you get the last word. What's your story of the year?
Well, the biggest story for me on my beat covering Congress is the Adam Kinzinger story. A few weeks after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Adam Kinzinger was one of 10 Republicans to vote to impeach President Trump. His views on Trump and what happened in the attack led him by the end of January to form a movement he now calls a Country First, where he is trying to, he said, bring back the Republican Party, fight for its spirit, fight for the future. But the arc of this story has been just growing throughout the year. He voted to impeach, he creates his own movement. He is the continuing leader against fighting conspiracy theories. And then you have Liz Cheney join him, and he has the drama after the congressional remap of what's he going to do or not do. And then finally, when the congressional remap came out, he had no good choice of a place to run. But the reality is he couldn't run anywhere because Trump and company would make it impossible for him to ever win a primary. He said he's not seeking another term. Now, the one thing we're waiting for, kind of to put a bow on this story, which I think will extend into next year, is whether or not he will decide to run for governor or senator. I don't think he will. I think he has interests in continuing his movement to try and bring back the party from a place where it's controlled by Trump. And he still has his work on the January 6th committee to keep him busy. He's also expecting a baby, I think almost any day now or by January. So I think if he ran for state office, it would mean his other national platforms and national interests would not have, would just suffer. The two other stories I covered that were also big throughout the year, of course, is that is going to be concluded, I think, by the end of the year, is the story that's been running all year about what job in the Biden administration Rahm Emanuel will get. Turned out ambassador to Japan, and the drama will end very soon because I expect his confirmation maybe as early as next week. So those are two of the stories that have run the year, Laura. And as we've almost run out the clock on this show, Laura and I will both say goodbye at the end. But before we say goodbye for the year, I want to try and have everybody subscribe in their holiday gift to the Sun-Times digital edition, which all of you know is the e-paper that I read first thing when I get up every day. Our digital paper gives you access to everything on the Sun-Times website, all for only $2.49 a month. So go to suntimes.com and subscribe. It's a great gift. Hope you will get it. As you know, our journalism depends on our subscribers like you. So everybody, have a great 2022. Thank you so much for joining us in 2021. And thanks to Madeline and Rachel for being with us on the last show of the year.
And don't forget us next month, January 20th is our next show. We'll see you then. Thank you, Rachel Hinton, Madeline Dubeck, and happy holidays to everyone.